The first person who actually stated such a precise definition of truth in familiar terms was the Polish mathematician and philosopher Alfred Tarski, who introduced his theory of truth in the 1930s and 1940s. Tarski's goal was not to come up with a list of all truths and a list of all falsehoods, just as it had not been the goal in the grandfatherhood case before to come up with a list of who is a grandfather of whom. Ultimately, it is the job of mathematicians to find out which mathematical sentences are true. It is the task of physicists to discover which physical sentences are true. It is the task of historians to determine which sentences about human history are true, and so on. Philosophers should not aim to be the better mathematicians, physicists, historians, or the like. Instead, the goal of a philosophical theory of truth is to clarify the meaning of the term true by determining under which conditions a sentence counts as true. Whether these conditions actually apply in the case of some particular sentence, maybe a mathematical question or a physical question or a historical question or the like, depending on what the sentence is like. I will soon sketch a Tarskian definition of truth. But before I do so, let us pause again for a second and consider what exactly we should expect of such a definition. How do we know whether Tarski puts forward a plausible proposal for such a definition? Tarski himself suggests two desiderata that a satisfactory definition of truth ought to satisfy. It should be formally correct and materially adequate. By formally correct, Tarski means that the definition should be precise, free of contradictions, and it should have the right form. The same form as other familiar definitions in philosophy, mathematics, or science. A form such as, for instance, the one of our definition of grandfather of from before. By materially adequate, Tarski has in mind the following. Consider this. Sentence 1. Snow is white is true if and only if snow is white. This is an equivalent sentence, a type of sentence which we discussed briefly already in the first lecture. Such a sentence expresses that what is to the left of the if and only if is equivalent to what is right of it. In the present case, the left-hand side of the equivalent sentence 1 is the sentence 2. Snow is white is true. This sentence 2 talks about another sentence, the sentence snow is white. And it says of that sentence that it is true. And that very sentence, snow is white, is precisely the right-hand side of the equivalence 1. That's sentence 3, snow is white. So the left-hand side of 1, which is sentence 2, says about the right-hand side of sentence 1, which is sentence 3, that it is true. In more schematic terms, the equivalent sentence 1 is of the form T. A is true if and only if A. In sentence 1, the sentence snow is white occupies or replaces the placeholder A in our scheme T. 1 is a particular instance of the general scheme T. In other words, from T we can generate sentence 1 and many other equivalences by replacing the symbol A by concrete sentences. Other such instances of T would be Tarski is a philosopher is true if and only if Tarski is a philosopher. The sentence Munich is in Germany is true if and only if Munich is in Germany. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is true if and only if 2 plus 2 equals 4, and so on. In each of these equivalences, the left-hand side ascribes truth to the right-hand side, where the left-hand side manages to talk about the sentence on the right by enclosing that very sentence within quotation marks. Using quotation marks is simply one convenient way of talking about linguistic objects. By means of quotation marks, the left-hand side of 1 mentions the sentence snow is white, that is sentence 3, while on the right-hand side of 1, that very sentence is used, that is, the sentence itself is stated in its normal sense without any quotation marks. Okay, now here's a question. Do you find sentence 1 plausible at all? Of course you do. Of course the sentence snow is white is true if and only if snow is white. What else? Trivially so, as one might want to say. And similarly for other instances of T. Let us call T the truth scheme. And let us call each of its instances a truth equivalence. Then this is what Tarski demands when he says that a definition of truth should be materially adequate. A definition of truth for the descriptive sentences of a language L is materially adequate if and only if the definition implies all truth equivalences. That is, all instances of the truth scheme, A is true if and only if A, in which the placeholder A is replaced by an arbitrary descriptive sentence in the language L. For instance, if the language L in question is a part of English that includes the sentences Snow is white, Tarski is a philosopher, Munich is in Germany, and 2 + 2 = 4 as descriptive sentences, then a materially adequate definition of truth for L will entail all the corresponding truth equivalences for these sentences. Snow is white is true if and only if Snow is white. Tarski is a philosopher is true if and only if Tarski is a philosopher. The sentence Munich is in Germany is true if and only if Munich is in Germany. 2 + 2 = 4 is true if and only if 2 + 2 = 4, and so on. And apart from being formally correct, Tarski expects any satisfactory definition of truth to be materially adequate in this sense. That is sort of a minimal constraint, really. If the definition were not even able to derive all of these quite trivial instances of the truth scheme, then the definition would probably not be a good one. It would fail to support some sentences involving the truth predicate that we find obviously acceptable. Indeed, acceptable on purely conceptual grounds, namely all the relevant truth equivalences. If a definition of truth is not materially adequate, then things are even worse, for the truth equivalences seem to capture what was right and understandable about the vague and unclear truth is correspondence to reality idea that I had mentioned before. For instance, while the left-hand side of sentence 1, Snow is white is true if and only if Snow is white, talks about the truth of the sentence Snow is white, the right-hand side of 1 talks about snow and its being white. The left-hand side concerns the truth of a sentence, while the right-hand side concerns reality. And the vague and unclear notion of correspondence is replaced by the pretty precise and clear logical notion of if and only if. So one might say that any definition of truth that fails to satisfy material adequacy fails to capture an important aspect of the, at least initially, attractive truth is correspondence to reality idea. Perhaps that aspect of it that one can make good sense of. Although the desideratum of material adequacy originates with Tarski, there is also more traditional support for it. Aristotle states in his Metaphysics that to say of what is that it is, or of what is not that it is not, is true. But that is reasonably similar to what the truth scheme expresses. For the if and only if in A is true if and only if A really expresses that either both sides of the equivalence are the case or both are not the case. That is, the truth scheme says nothing else than A and A is true, or not A and A is not true. And this is not far at all from Aristotle's dictum. What is true? To say of what is A, that it is, A is true, or of what is not A, that it is not, A is not true.